Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Before starting the video, please subscribe and keep watching for more details videos. Coco Gauff's former coach wants new rule introduced to tennis after players withdraw. I do get totally annoyed. There have been some big-name withdrawals from the US Open this year. This includes British number 1 Jack Draper, who pulled out of the US Open after his first round win due to an ongoing arm injury. Marketa Vondrousova is the latest withdrawal from the US Open, which came right before her quarterfinal match. After the former Wimbledon champion pulled out of her match, Vondrousova was sent a message from Aryna Sabalenka, who was her scheduled opponent. Both Draper and Vondrousova withdrew from their matches before they even took to court, but Coco Gauff's former coach, Brad Gilbert, believes there should be a new rule introduced for them. Brad Gilbert calls for rule to be introduced for players who retire from matches. Gilbert is often voicing his opinions on social media, but on this occasion spoke on the Served by Andy Roddick podcast. In an interview alongside Tracy Austin, Gilbert was asked what rule change he would like to implement into tennis. Gilbert issued a strong response, explaining how much it annoys him when someone retires due to injury and plays the next week or in doubles at the same tournament. I do get totally annoyed now about players pulling a rip cord in the middle of a match and then they play next week, said Gilbert. It is a really weird thing that a guy is pulling a rip cord in the third or fourth round and then literally it wasn't that bad that you could play next week. Or you are playing the doubles the next day. There should be a rule against that. If you pull out of match, you can't play next week. How many retirements have there been at the US Open this year? There have been 10 retirements or withdrawals at the US Open this year, 7 of which have come in the men's singles draw. The highest ranked of those is world number 6 Ben Shelton, whose retirement has caused people to call for changes. Shelton was clearly emotional after retiring at the US Open, with the American suffering a shoulder injury in his third-round match against Adrian Mannarino. Player who has retired/withdrawn at the US Open this year, next scheduled tournament. Junqing Shang Chengdu Open, 3 weeks after retirement. Sebastian Korda Chengdu Open/Hangzhou Open, 3 weeks after retirement. Jack Draper Chengdu Open, 3 weeks after walkover. Ben Shelton Davis Cup Qualifier, 2 weeks after retirement. Daniel Altmaier Davis Cup Qualifier, 2 weeks after retirement. Kamil Majkrak Chengdu Open, just over 2 weeks after retirement. Flavio Kobali Laver Cup, 3 weeks after retirement. Nuria Perez Diaz Jingshan Tennis Open, 1 month after retirement. Evilis China Open, over 3 weeks after retirement. Marketa Vondrousova China Open, nearly 3 weeks after walkover. Although Gilbert's rule is not actually implemented in tennis, he will be pleased to know that none of the 10 players are scheduled to compete within a week of their withdrawals or have played doubles since. The 2 players that are scheduled to compete in the closest time to their retirements are Shelton and Daniel Altmaier, who are set to play Davis Cup qualifier matches in 2 weeks' time. In the cool shade of an empty Arthur Ashe Stadium, Diego Martinez sat alone, his cap pulled low and fingers drumming against his knee. The morning air was unusually still for the first day of the US Open main draw. No thump of rackets, no squeak of sneakers on hard court, only silence and one glaring absence on the day's schedule. A player had withdrawn. Again, he sighed. Another match lost to the ghosts of precaution, strategy, or sometimes just plain nerves. Diego was a veteran coach, known not just for his work with rising star Coco Gauff in her early days, but for his passion for the purity of the sport. And now it was being diluted. I do get totally annoyed, he muttered aloud, pulling out his notebook. This isn't what tennis is about. It wasn't the first time a player had pulled out at the last second, citing injury, fatigue, or precaution. It was becoming a pattern, especially in the high-stakes world of Grand Slams, where players could earn thousands just by walking on court, regardless of performance. Diego flipped to a page he titled, The Unplayed Rule. His idea wasn't revolutionary. In fact, it felt like common sense to him. If a player withdrew before a match, there should be consequences, not to punish, but to protect the game, to respect the fans, the broadcasters, and most importantly, the opponent left without a chance to compete. He remembered a particular instance. One of his younger players had trained all summer for a wild card appearance in Miami, only to have her opponent withdraw 10 minutes before the match. The win went on paper as a walkover, but what it didn't reflect was the heartbreak. "There's no match-day magic in a default," Diego would always say. The issue wasn't just about strategy. In recent years, some top seeds had started using withdrawals tactically, entering tournaments to collect appearance fees, knowing full well they'd never play a match, or withdrawing after securing enough ranking points early in a tournament to avoid injury or save energy for the next event. It was becoming a loophole in the integrity of the sport. He scrawled across the notebook, "Mandatory on-court appearance rule." The rule was simple. Unless a player had a verified, medically confirmed injury or illness, they must step on court, even for one game, even for 1 point. Otherwise, no prize money, no ranking points, no stats, and, if proven to be habitual, potential fines or suspensions. Diego had already pitched the idea to a few colleagues. Reactions were mixed. The old guard, the ones who remembered playing with wooden rackets and stringing them by hand, nodded in agreement. "That's how it used to be," they'd say. "You showed up unless you were in the hospital." The new wave of sports scientists, agents, and player managers were less keen. "What about injury prevention?" they'd counter. "What about mental health?" Diego respected those concerns. He wasn't blind to the pressures of modern tennis, the constant travel, the media scrutiny, the toll on the body. But he also knew that other sports managed it better. Imagine an NBA team forfeiting a playoff game because one player was tired, he said during an ADP board meeting, or a Formula One driver skipping qualifying but still keeping their place on the grid. Tennis, in its individual glory, had no safety net, and that made showing up sacred. Later that week, Diego's thoughts were unexpectedly amplified when a young qualifier from Croatia was set to play her biggest match yet, her first ever Grand Slam third round. The world watched as she warmed up under the stadium lights, heart pounding, waiting for her opponent, the number 4 seed. The seed never showed. Official announcement: due to a lower back strain, the player has withdrawn. No one blamed her. Injuries happen. But the camera still panned to the young Croatian as she sat on the bench, racket in hand, head bowed, not in victory, but in disbelief. There was no crowd roar, no highlight reel, no moment to rise to. Her win was silent. That clip went viral. It sparked something Diego had long hoped for, a conversation. Podcasts debated it. Pundits dissected it. Journalists called for transparency. Players weighed in, cautiously. Even Coco Gauff, in a post-match press conference, addressed it. "I get it," she said. "We've all been there, nursing something, not wanting to risk more. But yeah, I think if you can step out for even 1 point, maybe it's worth doing. For the sport." Her words stirred the debate into something bigger. Not just about withdrawals, but about the respect owed to the sport, the fans, and the unwritten contract between opponents. A week later, Diego received a call. The Grand Slam board wanted to hear his proposal. He walked into the meeting with nothing but that same battered notebook. "This rule isn't about punishment," he began. "It's about accountability. It's about preserving the spirit of competition. If we keep allowing unverified withdrawals, we devalue the fight, the effort, and the meaning of a win." He paused. "You don't win a match by default. You win by playing." The rule proposal read, Rule 17b, on-court appearance requirement. In main draw matches of ADP, WDA, and Grand Slam events, a player must appear on court and commence play unless a medical certificate is provided and approved by the tournament's chief medical officer. The player is deemed medically unfit within 24 hours of match time, with evidence provided. The player has a documented injury from the previous round verified by tournament medical staff. Failure to appear without valid cause. Forfeiture of appearance fees and prize money for that round. No ranking points awarded. Repeat offenders may face further review and potential fines or suspensions. Minimum participation clause. If a player is able to serve or return 1 point, they may officially commence the match. Retirement mid-match is still permitted without penalty, barring abuse of the rule. The room fell silent after he read it. Some faces were skeptical. Some nodded. But everyone understood one thing. The time for silence was over. 3 months later, at the Australian Open, the rule was trialed under a provisional clause. The results were striking. Fewer withdrawals, clearer communication, and something unexpected, more respect. Players who once defaulted without much notice now took to court, played a few points, acknowledged their opponent, and bowed out gracefully. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. Diego watched it all unfold from his hotel room, sipping coffee as a lower-ranked player from Brazil took on a top 10 star who had tweaked her ankle the night before. She served 1 point, walked to the net, shook hands, and bowed to the crowd. The Brazilian player cried, not from winning, but from playing. In that moment, Diego knew the match wasn't just about tennis. It was about giving the game back its soul. Epilogue. In the months that followed, Diego was invited to speak at coaching summits, board meetings, and even a TED Talk titled, The Value of Showing Up. Not all players loved the rule. Some still argued for flexibility, for nuance. But slowly, tennis began to feel more whole, more earned, and for every young player who trained their whole life for a match that finally got played, even if for just a minute, it was worth it. Because in the end, the unplayed match teaches us nothing. But even 1 point can teach us everything.